She is Northwestern through and through. You can tell from behind her. Emily Ehman joining me. If there is a humongous volleyball match going on somewhere in this world, pretty sure she'll be there. She is dominating right now, a shining star in our industry. She is an analyst at Big Ten Network, also ESPN, digital host. The list goes on. I feel like, Emily, if I were to list off all of your responsibilities, we might be here for a while. But I'm Bryan Fenley and with ESPN broadcasting and doing volleyball as well. And Emily, I'm so excited for this opportunity to share your story, your journey, the obstacles you've overcome to get to where you are. Thanks so much for being a part of this.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. This is met you in Tampa and it was super fun and I've followed your stuff and I know you've, done some pods with some of my coworkers and
Yes.
they've had nothing but great things to say, so I'm excited.
I'm excited. I'm so glad to hear that they said that. And first of all, like here you are coming off wisdom teeth surgery. How are you feeling? I mean, you talk about being an athlete and overcoming injuries and going through all of that. How are you right now dealing with that?
We've been a little puffy, which like I got big cheeks on my face anyway, so just adding to that. But no, feeling good. This was something I was supposed to do like 10 years ago, but playing volleyball, obviously couldn't do it then, and then the plan was to do it after college, but then COVID happened and this was like truly the only time where I didn't have to be on camera for a few weeks. So we were like, let's do it early January, get it out of the way. Feeling great now.
So you're feeling great now. When you were a player, what was the hardest injury that you ever had to deal with?
It's a good question. I sprained my ankle a lot. I think once you sprain it the first time bad, you're just kind of susceptible to doing that. So I sprained it really bad in high school twice, was in a boot for like 6 to 8 weeks both times. I kind of would tweak it in college here and there and be out for like a week or so, but it was never too bad. But definitely in high school, that was tough. And I think like most people that play in college, you're typically the best player on your high school team, your club team, all of that. So I remember that was really tough for me, when the team is really relying on you to win games and to not be there. That was really hard and never fun. I never had a major injury where I had to have surgery or anything like that. In high school, I also had some shoulder issues that would keep me out of a game or two, but nothing too major. But it was always the ankles that just killed me. And even to this day, I'll just be walking down the sidewalk and like, roll my ankle and it's the worst. So anyone that goes through that, I'm like, I'm your girl. I get it. Nothing worse than a twisted ankle.
You don't have one now, thankfully. So I think you're
Thank
in a
God.
good spot. Emily Ehman is with me. I'm Bryan Fenley. So when I hear all of the things that you dealt with from an injury standpoint playing, I think of resilience. And when I see your career, I see resiliency. What do you think defines your resiliency in your career, but also post playing?
Yeah, I think the first thing I think of is I graduated college in March of 2020. So quite literally the worst possible time to try to break into sports. The world shut down, sports aren't happening. I having played college volleyball, I didn't necessarily have the time to put together a reel. So, I couldn't just send it out and try to break into sports. From that standpoint, I was kind of planning on using that spring quarter, my senior year, of really building a reel and sending it out and searching for jobs. So that was really tough. I was coming off of an internship that I absolutely loved, but I wanted to do more sports. That was a lot of politics and news, and I knew I didn't want to be in that space. So I kind of had to tell myself that, I've wanted to do this since I was about 10 years old. I've known I wanted to be a broadcaster since I knew that it was a job. And while I was going through this time of, real uncertainty and I don't know if I can make it in this business because at some point I do have to get a normal job. And if sports isn't it, then I need to start looking elsewhere. And I kind of had a revelation of, living in my mom's basement, like everyone was during COVID and, not doing anything. And I was like, I need to make this happen. If there's no outlet or, network team avenue for me to get this out, I need to just do it on my own. So I ended up starting a web show. It was called Big Ten Volley Talk. And essentially what I would do is just interview Big Ten volleyball athletes, coaches, alumni, people around the sport. Because one, I needed to gain some reps, but then two, I also knew that volleyball was one of those sports that had such a massive fan base, but at the time there was no one covering it from a digital standpoint. And, TV had done a decent job over the years really building up, and, we've seen what it can become now. But even 3 years ago, 4 years ago, it was not the same. There was no voices in the volleyball space on social media, and that was kind of a niche that I thought that I could tap into. So I started doing these interviews. I pitched it to volleyballmag.com, which is really one of the only volleyball publications covering the college game, and they picked it up as a digital series. And from then, I just kept pitching myself, and I kind of wasn't taking no as an answer. I pitched myself to Athletes Unlimited, and eventually got on as their digital host for their first season in the winter of 2021. I begged Big Ten Network to throw me on a game when I had legitimately zero experience. Like, I had no idea what I was doing. They knew that I could talk in front of a camera and I knew volleyball, but it's different when you put on the headset and you're calling a game. And to be fair, I listened back on that first game I did, and it was quite horrible. And I don't know what they saw in me, but I guess they saw some potential. While I'm like peeing down my leg over there. But I think from there, I really just tried to pitch myself to whoever, and would find, ways that I could improve other people's coverage. For example, Big Ten Network didn't have any voices in the digital space. And this was during the time when the tournament that was supposed to happen in 2020 was pushed to the spring. So I, emailed someone I had known there, and I said, hey, I really think you could do a lot with digital coverage in volleyball, and this is why you should send me to the tournament and do, previews, recaps, interviews, all these things. And I really think that resiliency piece of really knowing what I wanted and not taking no for an answer. Also just having, I don't even know if it's confidence, maybe delusion, to reach out to these people and say, hey, here's how I can help you, and here's what I'm doing. And here's what I can do for you, even if I actually had no idea what I was doing at the time. It was kind of like I'll get in that space and then figure it out as I go. But I think back to that time during COVID, and it was really hard, having that uncertain future, but then shaping that into, okay, if nothing's going to happen for me, I'm going to start making my own opportunities here.
What I love about what you just said is, like, when you were graduating and making that change, there was a lot that was out of your control. But
Yeah.
like, you found ways to control what you could. And that would be creating this media, creating these conversations, the platforms, the interviews, and reaching out and doing what you could. That go-getter mentality. How early, Emily, in your life do you feel like you found that? And who instilled that in you?
It's a good question. I think I've always been like the loud, outspoken kid. Like in class, you could look at any one of my report cards, and it was like, talks too much, needs to stop talking, like, way too much. And I was kind of like, all right, well, if you want me to stop talking, like, I'll make a career out of this then. And I think I've always had that kind of innate motivation for things that I really like doing, to be really motivated at it. I like most of us, played every single sport growing up, and I remember I'm in gymnastics when I was like 3 or 4. I wanted to be the best gymnast. So I would go in early and stay late and all those things. I think I always had that drive for things that I felt like I was good at, or felt like I really liked to do. And that kind of bled into other aspects of my life, like school. I knew that when I went to college, I wanted to go to a really reputable college, and play volleyball, but it was really important to me to, one, get a good journalism degree and go to a school that felt like it would challenge me, and not being comfortable there. So I think part of that, being a go-getter, is also being okay with being uncomfortable and really challenging yourself, and being open to trying new things, to where they might not work out, or you might feel really uncomfortable at first and not know what you're doing. But having that ability to say, okay, it's fine if I don't know what I'm doing, I can figure it out. And to have that, again, I don't know, confidence or delusion to kind of ride it out that way.
Confidence, I see. Delusion, I don't. I see somebody who's really hungry. And I loved how you said no was never an answer. In the sense of what your career has done, no means go. In a
Yeah.
way, you see something and you say, okay, this is another obstacle that I'm going to overcome. And as you were making your climb, how is it that it never got in the way of your ultimate goal? If there was a roadblock, if there was a no, how is it that mentally you can keep yourself in that space of saying, that's one no, but guess what? the next thing I say could be a yes. And I'm going to keep fighting and I'm going to keep fighting until I get it. I'm not going to let whatever that is determine my future. I'm going to be able to control as much as I can.
Yeah, I think, part of that is I don't even know if it's delusion or what it is, but I think I've always been a very confident person, since I was little. I think my mom is one of my biggest role models. She is such a strong, confident female, and, she worked my entire life, and she's retired now early and is living it up, but I always saw how hard she worked, and, to my parents divorced when I was 10, so, they would she's not a single mom, and I would spend time with my dad and my mom, with my brother, but it was like seeing her work so hard and also have to take care of a family and a household on her own. And honestly, same with my dad in the same space. Like they just both work so hard. And I feel like I always kind of had that innate drive, watching them work really hard, but also be like the best parents in the world. It helped translate to, I think, my job where, maybe someone did close a door, or maybe I didn't get an opportunity that I maybe thought that I was going to get or really hoped to get. For me, that kind of drove me to try harder and just be better. For example, like I started working with a talent coach about 2 years ago now, because I realized if I want to be in this space, like I want to be the best analyst in the US, or if not in the world. Like I want to call an Olympics, I want to do all these things. And to get there, I need someone who's going to work with me and push me to do that. So I started working. Her name is Jill Montgomery. She is one of the hardest coaches I've ever had. But it's perfect because I think as a former athlete, I have that mindset of I need someone to critique me and coach me and push me to be better. Because yeah, I can do it on my own, but I also don't know what I'm like looking at or listening to. I can watch myself back, and I can't pick up on things that, a former producer, former analyst could. So I think it's been really helpful for me to work with her, and one, also her giving me confidence to say, hey, maybe you didn't get this opportunity. Let's go get better. And then next time it comes up, you can, potentially be in a better position for it, or maybe just better off, and maybe you'll get it. So I would say working with her has been huge for me from a confidence standpoint, and just honestly just getting better at my job, and again, wanting to be the best volleyball analyst in the game.
What are the parallels from how you notice you best responded to coaching as a player to how you best respond to coaching in this space you're in now?
Yeah, I always liked hard coaches. Like I never minded when someone would really like dig into me. And I think it's funny because I played for a coach in college who I adore more than anything. His name is Shane Davis, and I think I heard him yell like twice during my entire time there. Like very mellow, level-headed guy. But growing up, I always had the coaches that were like digging into you, would kick you out of the gym, things like that. And I liked that. Like I love being in those high pressure environments, where I felt like they could push me. But also, I think having the respect of a coach when you know that they know what they're talking about helps. I, of course, had coaches growing up where they'd yell at me and I was like, this person has literally no idea what they're talking about. Like, I'm not taking that. But, I've been lucky, at least, in high school and in college, and now with Jill, to have people that I know what they're talking about, and also really explaining that why piece is really big to me. I'm in this industry, as most of us are, we're big question askers. We're really curious. And, when someone's coaching me, a lot of times I'll say, well, why is that the best way? Or like, how is that the best way? And I feel like I've learned to respect all of these coaches in my life because I know that they know it's the best way to do it, and they're not just, spewing some BS at me. So it's been interesting to navigate this, coaching that's very different than being in a gym, but I do a lot of the same things. I watch back every single game I call, which is wildly time consuming, but very much worth it. And I'll dissect it. We'll pick it apart. She'll dig into me of like, we just talked about this last week. Why are you still doing this? But then also, she'll hype me up and give me the confidence to say, you've done, XYZ so many times. Just like keep doing that. Like we're getting there. We're making so much progress. Think back to your first game this year, and, you're so much better than you were even 2 months ago. So I think having those people in place that I know can dig into me, but because I respect them enough to do it has been really, really great.
When you're looking at that video and you're going back and reviewing, what specifically right now, noting how much improvement that you've seen yourself, but right now, if you were to look at your latest match, are you trying to eyeball and see what you could do differently, or what has your attention?
Yeah, I would say two specific things that I really worked on, especially later in the season. I feel like I'm always working on the opens. It's which sounds dumb because it's 2 minutes where you're on camera for maybe 30 seconds, but it's the opening of a show. Like that's when you draw viewers in. So really nailing my opens is big and making sure that I'm commanding but conversational presence. And also for me this year, I really try to work on inserting my personality a lot more. I think it's really hard early on in this industry to feel comfortable and confident enough to where one, you know what you're saying well, two, you can deliver it. But then that third piece of really adding your personality, I think that's when you really attract viewers and that's when they, feel like they are, sitting on the couch watching a game with you. So that's something I really tried in my opens for the last few games to really get my personality out there and have it be a little bit more conversational. Something else that we really worked on was, especially for these tournament games, calling Sweet 16 and Elite Eight matches, there's a lot of really tight sets and, shifting my analysis to not really what happened during that specific point, even though, you do some of that, but I think really talking more strategy and, okay, this is what this team did this last point. Okay, this is what they have to do this next point. Or, they should probably run this, or this was a good decision because this team has been doing this. So really getting into strategy in those tight moments. But then at the same time, when you have these big crowds, like sometimes you don't have to say anything. Sometimes a crowd can just fully take it and they don't need my analysis, unless a replay comes in. So I think really, really nailing those opens was big. And then in those last, the red zone of volleyball. So from point 20 on, really talking more strategy and also really letting those moments breathe a little bit more.
When you're letting those moments breathe a little bit more, when do you then find the right time to speak?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think a lot of it is dictated by what I'm seeing on my monitor, so what the viewer's seeing. So if they're just cutting a bunch of crowd shots, I don't necessarily need to come in for a few beats. If the crowd is going absolutely crazy, I can see it because I'm there, but two, in my monitor, there's no reason for me to be talking over a crazy student section going wild. I know normally if they cut back to the players, I'll come in. Or if the crowd maybe isn't going as crazy, but they're still really loud, I'll give it just a few beats. I think it's something that you it's more just like a feel. You got to feel it out. Like if I'm sitting on my couch, I want to feel like I'm there. And I don't want to feel like someone's just talking the entire time. So the way to feel like you're there is hearing those crowd noises and, not feeling like as an analyst, I have to talk all the time just because I know the game and I should be talking. It's, what can I really add to this? And sometimes what I'm adding is just letting the viewer at home understand what it's like to be in that arena. So I think it really depends on the situation, but normally I'll take like 2 seconds, 3 seconds, depending on how crazy the crowd's going and what my director's doing with the shots.
It's so interesting, Emily, because we're in a business where you have to talk to make a living, but sometimes when we don't talk, it actually works best for the moment. But then there's also the idea of being a good listener. And so like when you're in the heat of the moment, when you're in the intense moments of a set, as you said, later in a set and things are really tightening up, what are you listening for? What are you able to process from what you're hearing in your ear to what your play-by-play person is saying in order to then use what they've said to put into words what you want to say?
Yeah, I think that's something that's really hard to do. And even not in those tight moments, it's really difficult. And this sounds dumb, but just to listen to your play by play. And a lot of analysts, you can tell sometimes you'll listen to them or play by play and analysts. If you're listening to them, they feel very disjointed. Like they're not, there's a play by play calling the game, and then the analyst is talking about whatever they want to talk about. But the really good ones, it's a dance. You're constantly playing off each other. And, as an analyst, I'm listening for maybe one word or a phrase that they said that I can also bring into my analysis to where we're working together and like we're a unit. Like at the end of the day, it's a team. Like I have to work really well with my play by play. I have to work really well with my producer and my director to make the best show I possibly can. Like, I think you can tell a lot when you're listening to broadcasts when you have a selfish announcer or a selfish play-by-play or analyst that really just wants it to be their show. That's either overstepping and talking too much, or a play-by-play that's talking over a replay or things like that, where it's very disjointed. And as a viewer, like it makes you uncomfortable a little bit. You want them to be able to play off each other. And again, it might sound dumb, but just listening to your play-by-play is so important, so you can build off what they're saying and the points that they're emphasizing. You can bring that into your analysis, and maybe that's not really what you wanted to talk about, but you can acknowledge that and then step into the crazy thing that happened that you saw earlier. But it is difficult in those big moments when there's so much happening, to really key in, also just to hear, because it's so loud in there. Sometimes you actually just can't hear people, or can't hear your play-by-play. That's happened so many times. But I think in those moments, it's really important to just kind of center yourself, really listening to your play-by-play and building off of that. And also, I will say, in those big moments, I feel like I'm lucky enough to work with producers and directors who aren't in my ear too much. They'll tell me when a replay is coming and all of that. But in those big moments, I think I normally work really well with them to know when to lay out and to know when they're just going to give me a bunch of crowd shots.
What is your best call?
Oh, I was really proud of, I think looking back on the season, I was really proud of my Sweet 16 game with Wisconsin and Penn State. Or Wisconsin, Oregon. I felt really good about my tournament games, which was really important to me. I've wanted to call tournament games since I started, you know, calling volleyball, and didn't get the opportunity last year and was pretty bummed. But then this year I, from the jump was like, what do I need to do to get on tournament games? Like, this is what I want to do. And I was lucky enough to get that opportunity. And so for me, that was like, all right, this is pressure. Like, I got to nail this. And to be fair, we were lucky enough to be in a regional where we had what I thought was the absolute best crowd and also the best matches. So that helps a lot when you have a match that's so back and forth, for programs that, like, Wisconsin and Penn State, they hate each other. These are programs that are like blue bloods of college volleyball that are expected to win national titles every year. And I felt really good about that match because I felt like I worked really well with Sam Gore, who's my play-by-play. I absolutely adore him. He's one of the best in the business. And then the atmosphere, I feel like I did a really good job of letting the moments breathe. And I think those were also two teams that I had covered so many times that season, to where I knew so many good storylines to bring in, or, storylines of how the players had done over the last few weeks, or even thinking back to the beginning of the season. I felt like Sam and I did a good job of bringing in those storylines, but not overdoing it. And we just got a really good game, and it was really fun for me to be in that environment.
What was your talent coach's reaction as soon as you got to talking to her about those NCAA matches?
Oh, she was my first call. I got the call from our coordinating producer at ESPN, and I literally started crying, which was so embarrassing. And she was like, literally, stop crying. But I hung up and I called Jill right away, and she was so happy. She was so proud of me. And she works with other volleyball talent as well. And I think, hearing from her, like, you deserve this so much. I think it meant a lot to me, because it was something that I've wanted to do for so long. And, that's like, eventually I want to call a national championship. And, the first step of that is just calling tournament games. So I was so thrilled. I literally started crying, and I'm not a crier, unless it's like happy or big sports moments. I cry a lot too, but I was absolutely thrilled. And I was really, really happy that I honestly just happy. I also happy I got a regional that had a lot of teams that I'd covered. Most of the matches I do are, for Big Ten Network. So I'm doing Big Ten teams, and I had Wisconsin, Penn State, Purdue so many times that year. And then Oregon was a team I hadn't had since the prior year, but teams that I was like wildly familiar with. So I felt really lucky in that sense. One, from a prep standpoint, because it made my life a lot easier. But then two, just to know and have really good relationships with all those coaches and players. It helps so, so much.
When you have those good relationships with those coaches and players, how are you able to extract info from them that other people can't?
Yeah, I think, I mean, so much of this business is trust. And I know that, some of these coaches or players are willing to tell me or talk to me about a little bit more. I don't know how many people are invited to John Cook's office to chat before a game. Like he's one of those coaches that, seems a little scary, but once you crack the ice on him, like he's a fun, goofy guy. I think it's built up over time though. I think once, you meet a coach for the first time and you're talking strategy and they might be a little hesitant to tell you things because, you might, um, they think you might go tell whoever. And, there's things that coaches and players are obviously hesitant with media at times. And I totally get it. But it builds up over time of not necessarily like keeping secrets, but stuff that they wouldn't want out on the broadcast. You keep that in and you gain trust over time with them, and having that FaceTime during practices or during Zooms, I think is really important. But also, I follow up with these coaches a lot too, just on their day-to-day lives. Like, for example, I'm really close with the Indiana coach, Steve Aird, because I'm from Bloomington, and he'll text me all the time about just like Bloomington stuff, or I'll check in with them. And it's important to me to keep up the relationships too, even in the off season. Because I obviously care about these coaches a lot because I'm covering them, but they're all great people. And I know that those relationships are really important to how well I can do my job. I think the other part of it too is, you know, I know a lot of people will go into coaches meetings and be really unprepared. I pride myself on being the most prepared person I could possibly be. Like I'm going into these meetings already having done pretty much all my prep. Now I'm talking to them about strategy. I'm talking to them about storylines of players, where I think they respect that too, because they can tell that I've already done my prep work. So I'm asking specific questions, about in rotation, whatever, doing this, or, I've noticed this player's numbers have been down, like what's going on with her, things like that, where I think a lot of people go into those meetings and that's their first start of doing prep, being like, hey, let's run through your lineup. Tell me about your team. Like coaches hate that. Like they want pointed questions, and like you got to be specific. So I think it's important to really be prepared going into those calls because you gain the respect of the coaches.
And the coaches will give you better information when they know that
Yeah.
you've put in the time. And so,
Yeah.
like, how often, Emily, will you go into, say, one of those pre production meetings when you're talking to the coaches and you think you know what the answers are going to be from the coach, and then you get a nugget that you're like, I did not expect that. But
Yeah.
because you came in prepared, that allowed itself to come about.
Yeah, I feel like it happens all the time. I go into those meetings and I'm asking even like strategic questions and I'm like, I know the answer, but I want them to say it just to confirm that like I know what I'm talking about. Or specific storylines on players. But I think once you've already done the prep, then you've answered so many of the questions you would have already asked them. Then you get to go a layer deeper. Whereas they wouldn't tell you that. They would be telling you the surface level stuff that you probably could have figured out on your own. So it happens all the time. If you go into these meetings really prepared, you can go a layer deeper than what you would get if you're just going in pretty blind.
Let me leave you with this. Emily Ehman is with me on Bryan Fenley. The last question for you. You get a lot of your questions answered in those meetings. You have a lot of answers for volleyball, given your experiences in the sport. Where do you still find yourself with questions about volleyball moving forward?
Oh, so many. And I had this conversation with Kelly Sheffield up at Wisconsin actually before these tournament games, or it might have been the end of the regular season. As a player, I mean, I sat the bench for 4 years. I played senior year a little bit, but mostly because of injuries. And I kind of made it a point to really, I knew the scout, better than anyone. I tried to be the strongest in the weight room, fastest, whatever, all those things. So I was never like the elite player. I didn't play professionally. I never coached. So for me, I remember talking to him about this. Like I do feel like I've hit a wall in terms of a threshold of my like volleyball knowledge and my volleyball IQ. And it's something that in the off season I'm going to try to work on a little bit more. And whether it's meeting with coaches or, and they've offered to just dive into film with me and for me to be able to pick their brains. Because there's a lot of strategic things that I don't necessarily think about that if you have a coach as an analyst, they pick that stuff up right away. So I feel like, there's a lot of analysts that know the game way better than me, and I totally understand that. But for me, I try to be a better broadcaster in that way. So, I can deliver the information that I do know, maybe in a better way than they could with more knowledge. So that's something for me that I do want to work on in this off season, and just honestly just getting a higher volleyball IQ. I started calling professional volleyball in the summers, which is actually really helpful in that because, the coaches and players will talk through a little bit more strategy with you. And it's just, when you have a better product out there, it's easier to have better strategies because they don't, it's a little bit cleaner. But that's definitely something that I want to work on in the next few months, of just at the end of the day, getting a better volleyball IQ.
But if I may, the you talking about when you were in college and you were on the sidelines a lot, watching the game, watching the match from the sidelines as opposed to being in what's going on in the crossfire, how does that give you a different outlook into being an analyst and seeing the game and watching it that way unfold in college?
Yeah, I think it did a lot. It taught me more about the game because you can see a lot more when you're on the sidelines than when you're up there. And I feel the same way as being an analyst. Like you can see the game from a different perspective. So I do feel like I picked up on a lot more than maybe I would have if I was out there playing. But obviously, if I'm out there playing a lot more, I probably would have picked on a lot more things. But I do feel like it gave me a sense of everyone's role. I was a libero, so I was only in the backcourt. And if I was playing, I probably would have really only picked up on what I was supposed to do as a libero out there. Whereas when I was on the sidelines, you see setting decisions, you see, blocking movements and all these things that I don't necessarily feel like I would have been focused in on had I been playing so much. So it was, I guess, in a way that I've honestly never thought about, really beneficial for me to be sitting on the
Yeah.
sidelines, watching and picking up on things that would teach me more about the game, and learn a scout better, and things like that, yeah, maybe I wouldn't have picked up on if I actually were out on the court playing.
Yeah, it's you see a more of a panoramic look at
Yeah.
what's playing out in front of you, and you see everybody else's roles beyond just like if you're in the match and you're like, I know I have to do this. And so even though in college you might have been on the sidelines, you've been anything but on the sidelines in your post-playing career when it comes to volleyball and beyond. Emily Ehman, I'm Bryan Fenley. Thanks so much, Emily. This was such a blast. I feel like we could continue on. We'll have to do it another time because obviously you've got a lot of exciting things coming up this off season. So I just am so thankful for this chat with you.
Thank you so much for having me. This was awesome. I feel like I learned stuff about myself during this too,
Good.
which is always great.
That's the best compliment I could ever get. Yes.